Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good evening and a very, very warm welcome to all of you. It gives me great pleasure and honor to be with you tonight. My name is Jasmine Taha Zaki. I'm a very proud AUC alumni, and I have the pleasure and honor to be your MC for this very special event tonight, celebrating the 10th anniversary of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Before we start, may I kindly ask you if you would rather to be hearing the speeches and the words tonight in Arabic, please raise your hands and our ushers will be handing out headphones for translation. Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, in 2009, the American University in Cairo announced the creation of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, GAPP. To put the process together and lead the school as its founding dean, it invited Mr. Nabil Fahmy, a prominent Egyptian career diplomat with ambassadorial postings in the US and Japan, and who was later to become Egypt's foreign minister. Tonight's celebration marks a decade of GAPP excellence, achievement, and globally recognized success. GAPP rapidly gained popularity as student enrollment quickly increased, and true to its vision over the years, the school formed alliances with international universities. It gained unprecedented international accreditations and rankings in the region, and it also expanded horizons for students and professionals. Today, the school is a proud regional leader in educating and also in empowering students committed to global affairs and public policy. On this very special occasion tonight, celebrating the 10th anniversary of GAPP, I would proudly call Mr. Francis Richardoni, the president of the American University in Cairo, to come on stage to give a welcome speech.
Thank you very much, Jasmine. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I don't dare start with a roster of all the distinguished names that are among us because that would take more than the time allotted to me. It is a very, very special pleasure to be with you this evening to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the founding of one of the most special parts of a very special university, our School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. As I considered whether to come back to Egypt and to come and join this fine university, I had heard many things about the directions it had taken in the intervening years since I had known it from serving here. I really had to do a lot of reflection. And the first question I had was, is this among the truly great universities as I had remembered in the world? And the definition of that being, is it one that is not simply detached and doing good detached analysis and observation of what's going on in the world, but one that is engaged, one that is out engaged with the problems of the world and attempting to solve them? And I met, as I was considering whether to come, one of the first people I checked with was Dean Nabil Fahmy, who is the founding dean, of course, of this School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. And we talked about where Egypt was going. This is back in 15. And what was the role of AUC and what was the role of his school. And he reassured me of what I had believed to be true and expected to be true, that indeed AUC was as engaged as ever, and we spoke about the role of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. I think what unites all of us here this evening, as I look around, is one way or another we have been involved either within states or outside of states and dealing with the great problems of the world. Some of us have done both and gone back and forth. Indeed, several of us, like myself, like Dean Fahmy, are refugees from national service, state service. And I dare say, without having asked Nabil, most of us who were in state service most enjoyed the engagement with business and science and academia and medicine and entertainment and art and all the other fields that are so salient in in solving the world problems and in defining where we're going. So all that to say that whatever our backgrounds, whether in national service, and that was a matter of discussion during the rich conversation we've had today, whether states are as salient, it's clear they're not as salient as they used to be, but how salient are they, and how can we as educators focus on the rising importance of all the other players in the world conversation today. That's why we're here this evening, to talk about where the world is going, how it's getting there, how all of us in our individual capacities, whether as educators or in other capacities, can influence that, and for the better. So I thank our distinguished panelists for having that conversation with us all today, and all of those who have come in the International Advisory Board of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. Thank you for a very rich discussion during the day today, and I look forward to the conversation yet ahead of us this evening. Thank you all very much. Congratulations to the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy.
Thank you, President Ricciardoni. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our host tonight, Dean Nabil Fahmy.
Thank you, Jasmine. President Ricciardoni, thank you very much for your kind words and the interesting points you made about the school, and you really hit it on the head. This is about the multidisciplinary components of how polity is managed, and that's what we try to do at the school, and it's also a function of a lot of friends and assets at AUC well beyond the school that we take advantage of. Dear esteemed guests, as the President just said, if I went through your titles, we'd spend most of the evening, but that's not why I'm going to skip the titles. I intentionally skipped the titles and decided to choose the word esteemed because everybody here, almost without exception, shares a common interest in public service and the efficient, equitable provision of goods and service. Everybody here is focused, first of all, on helping our communities, be they domestic communities or regional communities or the world at large. And it's really in that spirit that I thank you very much and that I welcome you here this evening. We're here, as has been said, to celebrate 10 years of the establishment of the school. And I will share a few comments on what we think were the most important achievements, or more importantly, where we'd like to go. But before doing that, and I know my faculty very seldomly actually do what I ask them to do, but can I ask the faculty, the staff, any students who are here to all stand up? Ladies and gentlemen, this story is about them. They're the ones who made it a success. They're the ones who wrote the history of these 10 years, and they're the ones who will take it a step further as we move forward. It could not have been done without them, and I wanted to start my comments by applauding all of them and express my appreciation for what they've done. So thank you all. I think it's an understatement to say that the world order over the last 5 decades, and particularly the last 25 years, has been in a state of rapid change globally, but also regionally. And the Middle East, most of all, has really had a turbulent, good and bad, turbulent last decade. It's really in that light that the school was born, and it's in that light that the school defined its vision and its mission. As was discussed this morning in our advisory board, we try to instill a commitment to the global good. It starts, of course, with our own communities, but it is about the world at large. And consequently, while, of course, we deal with issues that relate to the Middle East and to Egypt and America, given that we are in Egypt, frankly, we try to expand that domain to focus on the larger issues, be they climate change, be they the epidemics, be they cybersecurity, terrorism, whatever they may be, because from our name, being a School of Global Affairs, we really strongly believe that each of the communities around the world is interrelated and complements each other. We ultimately work from a finite list of resources, and we have to find ways to take the most positive synergies in this process, and also to deal with problems that in today's day and age, especially with technology today, do not have concrete borders or geographical limitations, as was the case in many cases before. Now again, many of you have mentioned to me that we've given them 2 or 3 bags, so I won't tell you what's in the bags, but one of the things in the bags is a description of the school. So very quickly, it was established based basically on 3 departments and 5 centers. You can get the details from the bag. What we've tried to focus on, however, as the project that we've embraced, and I underline again, the we applies to the whole school, is to try to promote enlightened governance. We do not determine what kind of governance. We do not determine what kind of structure you want, whether it is in political governance or, frankly, all the different kinds of governance that apply. But what we emphasize is enlightened governance. And to do that, it has to be based on a strong commitment to integrity, a strong commitment to the rule of law, and a strong commitment to ethics and inclusiveness. Without that, we cannot succeed in dealing with the public good, and we cannot succeed in being a school of global affairs. Our faculty, students, and frankly, even our staff, come from many different nationalities. As you will see from the documentation, our alumni come from 60 different nationalities, even though we're only a decade old, and even though foreigners have shied away from the region a little bit for a couple of years, but are now coming back, and I'm very happy to say so. I can proudly say that while we started a decade ago, today we are recognized both regionally and globally as being a very prominent, very distinguished, very serious School of Public Affairs. And in order to be able to teach enlightened governance, we have reached out regularly with the support from the AUC administration to try to hire top-notch faculty that are up to date with the issues at hand. And they are issues, frankly, which when I started my previous career were not defined the way they are defined today. Everything from sovereignty to the frailty of law to power and so on and so forth. So to have a continuous inflow of top-notch faculty locally and globally is an important point. To also achieve a global composition in terms of the student body is important to us. That was challenging between 2013 and 2017, but we're picking up on that again. Just by way of indication of the hard work of the gentlemen and women that stood up at the beginning of my comments, we have moved from a school that started off with 16 degrees, majors and minors, today, 10 years later, to a school that actually has 28 degrees, majors and minors. And the essence of it is almost 50-50 undergraduate and graduate, although We have many more graduate programs, and that's been really the growth factor over the years past. We will continue to grow slowly, because slow growth, I think, is a more healthy process. We will continue to grow both in the graduate level as well as the undergraduate level. But let me emphasize again, we very strongly emphasize ethics, good governance, and the effective, transparent communications. You cannot have good governance if you don't convey the message, if you're not transparent, and if you don't base it on a rich degree of ethics and integrity. To do that, and I say this very proudly, it's not only about the work done by the school with its students. That's the traditional academic work, and it is extremely important. That's the core of our work. But if you're looking at enlightened governance, you actually also need to engage the community as a whole. And we've made a serious effort to engage the Egyptian community and the Arab and Middle East community to explain the context of what we're trying to project, to bring in ideas from abroad that may not have reached the community here, and vice versa, to provide our own community a vibrant voice internationally. And to do that, we've held 75 sessions of what we call the Tahrir Dialogues. These are public events, open invitations, always held at our Tahrir campus, always on important issues. And frankly, they are so attractive to people, we don't issue invitations any longer. We simply issue announcements of what the issue will be and when, at the timing and so on. I would argue also that in engaging our society and trying to define what is the priority need that exists, whether it is in the civil service or in municipalities. One of our interesting projects really is the Public Policy Hub, which we started in 2017. And it's done in cooperation with sponsors, but at the end of the day, the team that works on this hub literally goes out to the community and discusses with them and tries to determine from them what policy issues are their priority, what skill sets do they need to achieve their successes. And that's really how we develop that. You will also see in your bags beside you several copies of the Cairo Review, which is called the Cairo Review on Global Affairs. That's really been, again, another attempt to bring international voices to the Middle East, but also to make sure that Arab voices and Middle Eastern voices are heard internationally. Now, we don't claim to be equivalent to the Harvard Review or even to Foreign Affairs, but I can tell you, given our size, we are cited quite well in different fora that are interested in foreign affairs and global affairs. And a point I'd also like to make, anybody who deals with academia and doesn't appreciate that we're basically investing in the future rather than simply trying to record the past, doesn't really understand the full responsibility that falls on our shoulders. And I really believe that AUC is committed to the youth component of society. We're committed to helping create a better future. And it's in that context that the university chose as one of its centennial projects a 3-year project called El Mustaqbal, the future, the Middle East looking forward. Now, our school will have the pleasure and the honor of managing the process of that study, but it is a multidisciplinary project, and it involves the AUC community as a whole. It's a joint effort throughout, and the objective is not to tell you what the Middle East will look like, because nobody really knows, but the objective basically is to try to define what the main policy challenges will be in the next 10 years and present a number of recommendations. This is as I said, a 2.5-year project. There will be workshops and conferences to do it, and at the very end, we will produce a blue ribbon report with policy recommendations. But all the work being done during the 2.5 years will become public record for everybody, either at AUC or beyond that. The school is proud of its achievements, and frankly, we will do a little bit more of what we're doing, but we are also focused on what we can do better. And one of the things that the faculty and I have been discussing, and the staff, is how to make the student experience at the university better, both in terms of how they enjoy the process at AUC, how they really take full appreciation of the substance of the programs that they get, but also, given that we are a global affairs school, how this relates to what's happening around the world and how it relates around the world, but also how to provide them hands-on experience so that they go from their studies here to their new occupation or their resumed occupation and are able to raise the level of that practice to a higher level. And again, this happens at the law department, it happens at the public policy department, it happens at the communications and journalism department, it happens at the gender center, it also happens in the Middle East Studies Center, the American Studies Center, Refugee Studies Center, and of course the Digital Television Center. All of these entities are both teaching entities as well as research entities. But we try to make the point that when you finish your studies here at AUC, you will be better qualified to do your job, irrespective of what your choices may be in terms of policies or politics. This morning, we had a very interesting day-long meeting with our International Advisory Board, and they've honored us by being here for the last 7 years, and they honor us also by attending this dinner. One thing which we concluded with today is how do we look and how do we move forward? Specifically, how do you teach global affairs in the future? And I was very happy to see that while our school, as proud as we were for what we did, realized that we need to do it differently as we move forward. The discussions we had with the board not only confirmed our achievements, but it also really opened a lot of insightful ideas in terms of the real challenges we move forward, whether they are relating to global affairs per se, or education and teaching generally. I promise not to take too long, although it's great to have a captive audience. But I will conclude because you are not only my peers, my superiors, and my friends. But let me close by thanking all the sponsors that have, over the years, supported AUC or supported our school. While I think AUC can support itself, I would argue that the support of the sponsors has been instrumental, really, in enabling us as AUC to offer top-notch, high-quality education to a much wider scope of students throughout Egypt. So I'm not going to name the different sponsors, but I can tell you from personal experience, your support has helped us bring in many more students of top-notch quality, and they've made our own programs much, much better. So you've all had a role in making this region a better region, hopefully in the future. My last points, and I apologize if, my last point, and I apologize if I miss somebody, but you can pick on me tomorrow. I want to thank Jasmine Zeki for agreeing to be our MC today. She is an AUC alumni. and we tend to pick on her every now and then to host events, and she's never said no to us, and so we're very proud of her, and I thank her, Jasmine, for doing this. I want to thank Layla Al-Mushnib, Lubna Hafiz, and Sharif Mahfouz, and all of their team for putting this whole event together. I know they may have bombarded you with emails, but it's all with the desire to make this more efficient for everybody here. So thank you all for being here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you, Dean Fahmy, and happy 10th anniversary, and to many, many more years of success to come. As the Dean mentioned, GAPP's success has been a collective effort. And on this occasion, we wanted to acknowledge 2 alumni, a staff member and a faculty member, for their personal high achievements as well as representations of the overall excellence of their colleagues. Our alumni awardees have carried GAPP's name proudly, pushing boundaries with their hard-earned academic achievements and building on the skills, experiences, and values with which they graduated from GAPP. Our first distinguished alumni awardee is Ms. Duha Zuhairi. She is a graduate of the Journalism and Mass Communication Department in 2010. With a master's degree in television and digital journalism, she has worked as a video journalist for the LA Times, Al Jazeera, Al Masri Al-Yawm. Ms. Zuhairi is also an independent filmmaker who has produced several documentaries on Al Arabiya news channel before joining Al Hadath TV in 2013, and she presents a show called The Egyptian Streets. Our second alumni awardee is Ms. Noura Wahbi. Ms. Noura Wahbi graduated from the Public Policy and Administration Department in 2013. With a master's degree in public administration, she was awarded the Commonwealth Trust Scholarship along with the B.P. Murray Edwards Academic Excellence Scholarship to pursue her PhD in Development Studies at Cambridge University, which she just completed January of this year. As a dedicated and a high-achieving alumni, Ms. Wahbi has played a pivotal role in promoting the school and achieving the NASPA accreditation. Our next award is to recognize achievement and excellence for a staff member of GAPP who has demonstrated outstanding leadership and dedication. The award goes to Maisa Ayoub. This is for her performance at the Center for Migration and Refugee Studies. Ms. Ayoub was instrumental in developing the center's first strategic plan as a research center within the school, and her collaborative work with bodies like the International Organization for Migration has been instrumental in extending the center's impact beyond the AUC community. Ladies and gentlemen, we move on to faculty, and from the faculty we would like to recognize Dr. Layla Al-Baradei. Dr. Layla Al-Baradei has served GAPP at the highest standard and has played a key role in the school's leadership, supporting Dean Fahmy in building GAPP and serving as the Associate Dean for Graduate Studies and Research until 2018. Dr. Baradei was a founding faculty member of the Department of Public Policy and Administration and has been internationally recognized among academics in her discipline, Public Administration. And on the occasion of the 10th anniversary of the school, for the first time, the school is offering a Distinguished Public Service Award. This award is not specific to a particular discipline or even necessarily to a unique achievement. It is not restricted to AUC alumni or to former public and civil servants. Rather, it is to recognize distinguished individuals who have been selfless in always defending or keeping the public interests high on their priorities. In other words, this award is to recognize a lifetime of selfless service to the public good and the school is honored to have as its first awardee Dr. George Abisab, who has collectively dedicated his career to the public good of Egypt and beyond. Dr. Abisab was born in Heliopolis, received his Bachelor of Law from Cairo University in 1954. He pursued postgraduate studies in law, economics, and politics at the universities of Cairo, Paris, Michigan, Harvard, Cambridge, Geneva, and the Hague Academy of International Law. Dr. Abisab received several honorary degrees and awards, including Doctor of Law from Brussels University in 2001 and the Hague Prize for International Law in 2013. He has also held numerous professional associations throughout his career, including honorary member of the International Commission of Jurists in 2009 and president of the African Foundation of International Law since 2003. I can go on and on. It's a very long CV, but I don't want to keep you standing for long. He has also served as counsel and an advocate to numerous governments in international litigation, including the Egyptian government, the Palestinian Authority, and the Tunisian government. Lastly, Dr. Abisab is the author of numerous books and articles on the applications of international law and the role of the UN across various regional contexts. Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I was a little bit amazed when I was informed about this honor. It's the second time the American University does me an honor. In 2010, I was granted a doctorate honoris causa. And as was mentioned, I have not studied here. I have not taught here. But some of my students are teaching here. On the other hand, I have never been a public servant in the sense of being in the servant of a public servant in a government or in an international organization. So I interpret this honor as meaning that if one does his job in whatever position, taking into consideration the public interest and trying to serve whatever cause he considers as an important public interest, then he would have been a good public servant. And in the modest way I did as a teacher, as a counsel, as a judge, international judge, I tried my best, and I thank you very much for this honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, may I now call on Provost Ihab Abdurrahman, who has requested to say a few words on this very special occasion.
Good evening. May I ask the chairs, associate deans, and director of centers to join me on the stage at the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy? We're not going to revolt. Laila, can you join us also on the stage? I'm pleased to be here tonight as we celebrate the 10th anniversary of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. As you know, the school is comprised of 3 departments, 5 centers, and offers 5 undergraduate degrees, 9 graduate degrees through the school's 9 graduate degrees, and 5 graduate diploma, as well as its professional training through its professional arm, the School Executive Education Program. In addition, the school and its faculty contribute to the public discourse through various research and policy initiatives. Under the leadership of Dean Nabil Fahmy, the school has become a home to an impressive cadre of faculty who combine academic and professional experience to provide our students with truly unique experience. GAPP students and graduates have gone on to accomplish notable feats, including selection at the 2019 Knight Hennessy Scholar at Stanford University, winning of awards at the prestigious Broadcast Education Association competition, and at the African Court of Human and People Rights Moot Court competition. We are proud to call Nabil Fahmy as an AUC alum. His professional achievements as an ambassador to Japan and subsequently to the United States of America, his tenure as Egypt's Minister of Foreign Affairs, and his participation in an appointment to numerous global governance bodies demonstrate the heights to which our graduates can achieve. Dean Fahmy continues to serve as an inspiration to our students, and his dedication to contributing to the public discourse on the modern Middle East and its future enhance AUC OWN's positioning as global leader. Dean Fahmy, on behalf of AUC and on behalf of the School of Global Affairs and Public Policy, thank you for your service to Egypt and AUC and providing leadership to GAPP for the last 10 years. Dean Fahmy, would you please join us on the stage? Thank you very much and enjoy your dinner.
Very well deserved, Dean Fahmy. I have to let you in on a very tiny secret. Of course, Dean Fahmy was very much involved in all of the details for tonight's event. But this part, it was a total surprise for him. He didn't know about it up until this moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, let us move on to our third phase of the event tonight. A very distinguished panel of professionals and academicians of interdisciplinary backgrounds and diverse professional experiences are here to discuss a wide-ranging topic, but one that GAPP truly believes is worthy of discussion during these changing and very turbulent times and on the occasion of our 10th anniversary. The panel topic is "Where is the world going?" and the moderator tonight is Mr. David Ignatius. Could I kindly ask Mr. David Ignatius to come on stage? And I will also start asking our panelists to join us on stage. Dr. Bahauddin, Ambassador Mahboubani, Ambassador Menon, and Dr. Slaughter, could you kindly join us on stage? Mr. Ignatius is a prize-winning columnist for the Washington Post, a best-selling author who has been covering the Middle East and the CIA for more than 25 years. He graduated from Harvard College and with a BA in Social Studies, and from King's College, Cambridge, with a diploma in economics. He has authored 10 novels and also wrote the libretto for an opera that premiered in Amsterdam with the Dutch National Opera in 2017. He's a fellow of the Harvard Kennedy School's Welfare Center and has taught as adjunct lecturer at HKS. He has won numerous journalism awards, including the 2019 George Polk Award, and he's married and a father of 3 daughters. Our panelists, our distinguished panelists tonight, Dr. Ziad Bahauddin, an Egyptian lawyer, an expert on financial law, investment and company laws, governance, compliance, and economic legislation. Dr. Bahauddin has held several public positions, including the Deputy Prime Minister for Economic Development and Minister of International Cooperation, Member of Parliament representing South Asyut. Our distinguished panelist, Ambassador Mahboubani, a senior advisor and professor in the practice of public policy at the National University of Singapore. Mr. Mahboubani has led 2 distinguished careers, 33 years in diplomacy and 15 years in academia. He is the first Singaporean ambassador to preside over the UN Security Council and also the founding dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. He was selected as one of the Prospect magazine's top 50 world thinkers in 2014 and as one of foreign policy's top global thinkers in 2010 and 2011. He has authored 7 books, one of which was selected by the Financial Times as one of the best books in 2013. Ambassador Menon is a visiting professor at Ashoka University in Delhi and a distinguished fellow with Brookings. He was formerly the National Security Advisor and Foreign Secretary of India, has served as the Indian Ambassador or High Commissioner to China, Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Israel, and has a number of books to his name. Dr. George Njenga, and I hope I'm pronouncing the name right, is the Executive Dean at the Strathmore University Business School. He specializes in strategy, governance, and leadership, holds a PhD in political philosophy and a master's in governance and culture of institutions from the University of Navarra, Spain, as well as a master's in business administration. He is especially interested in business and financial journalism and works with the Bloomberg Media Initiative to train trainers across 5 African countries, has set up 2 institutes to teach and practice advanced policy, research, and management. Finally, Dr. Anne Marie Slaughter, the president and CEO of New America, a think and action tank dedicated to renewing America in digital age. She's also the Bergie Kerstetter University professor and international affairs at Princeton University. From 2009 to 2011, she became the first woman to serve as director of policy planning for the United States Department of State. Dr. Slaughter has received the Secretary's Distinguished Service Award for her work leading the Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review, as well as Meritorious Service Awards from USAID and the Supreme Allied Commander for Europe. I now hand over the floor to Mr. Ignatius. I hope you enjoyed the panel and the discussion. Looking forward to hear from you.
Thank you, Jasmine. I hope my microphone is on. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to join in honoring my friend Dean Nabil Fahmy on the 10th anniversary of his School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. My mic is not on, they tell me. My light is on. Yes, here's my mic. And we want to also honor President Richard Doney on the 100th anniversary of the American University in Cairo. I want to just begin by saying that one of the things that I feel proudest about as an American to see my country's name attached is the American University in Cairo and other American universities like it. I'm going to share a secret with this audience that you won't find in any of my biographies. 2 of my great-grandfathers were educated at a university just like this one, called Euphrates College, founded by Protestant missionaries in the Ottoman Empire at that time. So this has special meaning for me to be here to join in this celebration. Like every panelist, I think it's fair to say, I grew up in the shadow of the old
order led by the United States. We sometimes think of what Dean Acheson said in his memoirs, which he titled Present at the Creation. That's the world that we all were formed by, but we can see that that world is changing radically. So the subject of our panel tonight, and I think the perfect way to honor this wonderful School of Public Policy, is to ask each other and to ask all of you, where is the world going? What will replace this old order that we know so well? What are its strengths? What are its potential defects? And I want to ask, to begin our conversation, Professor Kishore Mahbubani. As you heard earlier, he is the founding dean of the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy. We have many deans and founding deans on our panel. More to the point, in terms of tonight's discussion, he's the author of a very provocative and well-reviewed book called Has the West Lost It? And like a good author, he's brought a copy. I hope he'll sign them afterwards. But Kishore, start us off by talking about where the world is going.
Thank you. I wonder, can you hear this, Mike? Should I just use that one? Yeah. Thank you very much, David. Let me begin by congratulating Nabil on this wonderful accomplishment. As a fellow founding dean, I know how difficult it is to be a founding dean. The question is, where is the world heading to? Let me mention 3 directions. 2 are certain. 1 is uncertain. The first certainty is that the world is going to be a better and better place. In fact, the human condition has never been better and will continue to be better by every measure. In war and peace, your chances of dying in interstate war, almost impossible. Global poverty. When I was a child in Singapore, our per capita income was the same as Ghana, $500. I was put on a special feeding program, right? Because I was undernourished. Now I'm overnourished. That world where you had 75% of the world's population in extreme poverty is now down to 10% or less. And the third fact is that the global middle class population is going to explode from 1.8 billion in 2010 to 3.2 billion in 2020 to 4.9 billion in 2030. Amazing world. So it's a good world that's coming. Point number 2, certainty. It'll be the Asian century. I say this for certain because from the year 1 to the year 1820, for 1800 of the last 2000 years, the 2 largest economies were always those of China and India. It's only in the last 200 years that Europe took off and North America took off. The past 200 years of Western domination of world history have been a major historical aberration. All aberrations come to a natural end. So it's perfectly natural to see the return of Asia. And it's happening so fast. In 1980, China's GNP in PPP terms was less than 10% of the United States. By 2014, it had become bigger. And today, the top 4 economies in the world in PPP terms are number 1, China, number 2, United States, number 3, India, number 4, Japan. 3 out of the 4 are already Asian. The Asian century is coming. So what's the uncertainty? The uncertainty is what my book is about. How will the West adjust to this? In theory, the West should be celebrating this moment because the reason why Asia is coming back is because of gifts of Western wisdom. Asia needs to send the West a big thank you note. Thank you. Thanks to your ideas, we have succeeded and are doing very well. The West should be celebrating. But instead, as you know, and I know, the West has never been so pessimistic. They've elected Donald Trump. Europe is busy with Brexit. And the tragedy here is that at a time when the rest of the world is doing very well, the one civilization that has contributed the most to its success is now getting lost. Now, fortunately, there is a way out for the West. And one of the biggest recommendations I make, if you want to get a better world, to continue to get better and better, we should take advantage of the 1945 multilateral institutions that were gifts from the West to the rest, and let's strengthen them now. Strengthen the UN, the World Bank, the IMF, the WTO. Unfortunately, at a time when they should be strengthened, the WTO is being crippled, and President Donald Trump is about to appoint to the World Bank someone who despises the World Bank. These are tragic mistakes being made at precisely the wrong moment of history. Just the last point was that, and I'm going to stop here, is that tragically, at a time when we can truly build a better world, really, and I mean it, the West has got lost after having created this better world for all of us.
I've got one.
So, yes, with that's not an optimistic opening, I would say, for where's the world going. But let's turn to Anne Marie Slaughter.
Can the people in the back hear me? Can the people in the very back hear me? Good. So you can stop talking. Thank you. So Kishore is always a hard act to follow. He is a brilliant provocateur, but one of the things he says in his book is that the West has given the East Enlightenment reason. So I am going to subject his claims to the cool light of Enlightenment reason. So Kishore argues that the E7, and I will tell you which countries those are in a minute, the E7 will soon eclipse the G7, that the E7 will have over 50% of the world's economy, and the G7 will have barely 20 to 25. However, I'm certain you don't want to be rude. Thank you. However, the E7. So the E7 are supposed to be China and India, Brazil and Mexico, China and Russia, Russia and Turkey, and then Indonesia. Now the G7 are allies. The G7, obviously, the Western European countries, the United States, Canada, and Japan. They are integrated politically, socially, as well as economically. Even though my president is doing, he's not really my president, but even though he is doing everything he can to alienate every ally we have, our societies are still deeply integrated. Now let's just think about China and India. I do not expect to see them close allies anytime soon. Brazil and Mexico, I love them both. They're not known for their close relations. China and Russia, sometimes yes, sometimes no. Russia and Turkey, same thing. And Indonesia, a very important country, is not connected to any of those. So I question the power of the E7. But I do agree with Kishore that Western elites are far too complacent. Because one thing we can be certain of is that the liberal order of 1945 will not survive to 2045. That would be as if the world were ruled in 1945 by the powers of 1845. That is not going to happen. The great powers of the world including many of the powers that Kishore names, are not going to stand by and be run by the victors of World War II forever. So now we come to the challenge. Donald Trump has a very clear idea of what should happen after the liberal order of 1945 crumbles. And indeed, he is quite happy to help it crumble. So too is Vladimir Putin, and I would say Xi Jinping. They have a vision of the world that is much closer to the 19th century. It is a vision of great power politics in which countries make deals with one another rather than being part of a rule-based order. So what do all countries, and this is not about the West, this is about all countries, as Georges Abissab would say, who believe in a rule-based order of any kind, it is up to us to come up with a vision of that order that can actually solve global problems. And the current order is incapable of doing so. In my 1 minute left, let me just sketch what such an order would look like. It would indeed have international institutions, and yes, to Kishore, they would not be run by the Europeans on the one hand and the Americans on the other, trading off the World Bank and the IMF. However, those institutions would transform from fortresses into hubs. They would become anchors of a global order, connecting to business, civic groups, universities, faith groups, all different parts of global society, because it will take all of us to tackle climate change, global crime, resource scarcity, and all the conflict that will come from those scarcities. So that is what an actual vision of a 21st century global order will look like. And here, let me go back to Kishore, because that is a very open vision of an international order, of international institutions that are open to many different participants. I suggest to you that in 2050 or 2030, certainly, probably 2040 and 50, the dividing line will be between those countries that are open to ideas, open to people, open to data, open also to goods and services, although taking care of their own people. Those countries will be open on the one side against those who are closed on the other, and a number of Kishore's E7 show every sign of pushing being closed rather than open. So I leave you with the question, where is the world going? We've got a lot of problems. We need a global order that can address those problems, but I am not giving up on the United States, on Europe, on Japan, on Canada, on many of the world's countries who believe in an open society and believe in a rule-based order. So I will put my vote with the West.
Thank you, Anne-Marie. So I want to turn now to another founding dean, Dr. George Jenga, who's come to us from Nairobi. One of the questions that I ask myself when I think about where the world is going is whether Africa in this new world order will play a more significant and involved role in the future than it has in the past.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Can you hear me well? You can? Fantastic. So in case there is noise from the microphone, kindly give me a sign. So Africa is an enigma for the simple reason that right now, with a population of about 1.2 billion people, has never really integrated its economies. However, just recently, 22 countries ratified through their parliaments the African Union, the new African Union, Africa Continental Free Trade Area. That simply means that for the first time, the distortion of Africa's economy based on the breakup of the different economic regions will begin to be reconstructed. In effect, If you're looking a little bit ahead at 2035, 2050, we are going to see the East and the West merge their economies through the support of countries like China. The China Silk Road will take place. And it will take place because most African governments have gone to economic, I would say, partnership. Right now, it's a partnership, although partnership takes two to jingle, but my doubt is as to whether one partner is very heavy with cash and the other one is very poor with needs, and that is Africa. Nevertheless, it's very important to understand that the Silk Road will connect the East and the West. Regarding the North, there is still an enigma because of the Maghreb region. Is this facing towards the Middle East or is it facing towards Africa? And I don't know because I haven't studied carefully the Middle East question. The only thing is that I feel all the struggles of the United States and most Western countries to support the Middle East, to bring it to peace, to integrate its economies has largely failed. So we have to start realigning the Middle East economic and policy structure and integrate it in a different way. I'm not going into the details of ISIS and all the rest of the thing. Well, so Africa will play a very important role in about 25 to 30 years. Not very close in the region of 10 years because a large part of its population is still unskilled and a large part of the geospatial structure is not connected. We do not have roads, infrastructures of every kind. It's true that probably about 200 million are already connected to the World Wide Web, but that leaves about 800 million to 900 million people not connected. But we have seen an incredible shift and speed in development. Number one, I feel that financial transactions, cash to the people, will change significantly in the next 10 years. For one, the normal banking structure will change. As you already know, Amazon, Microsoft, and Google have applied for banking licenses in New York. That basically means that anybody in the world can communicate and transact with anybody in the world much easier in the next 10 to 20 years. That depends on very many things of integrating banks, of integrating cash, of getting the right exchange rates, and so on and so forth. And of course, finally, of distributing goods efficiently across the world. But this will be significant for Africa. The second thing that is fundamental is that professional skills will become easily adaptable by even the poorest. And the reason for this is that most of the technical skills will be online. And therefore, a large population in the world will access capabilities which hitherto lay in very few hands. And those hands are the ones that dominated the world in the last 300 to 400 years. It's more intelligent now in Africa to talk about the satellite structures and methods, data science and data analytics, AI. I was just laughing the other day that it's actually an African who heads the Tesla mechanical section. It's actually a Kenyan, my fellow countryman. And there are quite a number of Kenyans, Ugandans, and Tanzanians, and Nigerians already working significantly in all these powerful structures that will control the world in a few years. AI. So 40%, averagely speaking, of the world's jobs will change. More and more people who are currently working in areas of mechanics, engineering, education, any menial job for that matter, any administrative job like an accountant, a secretary, and so on and so forth. These jobs will be reorganized. I don't say they will be wiped out, they will be reorganized. And in the past, when things were reorganized from a technical perspective, now I don't remember specifically, but imagine that suddenly you have many cars in Africa, which is not the case right now. You'd need many drivers. The problem is that in the next 20 years, most cars will be driven through AI. And so, what sort of jobs will emerge? Jobs around the ability to access data, the ability to use technology to analyze that data. Let's be more accurate. I feel that Africa will therefore begin to play a very important role in processing goods, because they will acquire this capability much faster than the world would imagine. And in fact, they will provide a very significant part of that. Let me work out. No, I'm not God. I accept that I'm not God, therefore I can't see the future. But at least I can say this, that whilst the population of the Indo-Pacific, the population of China, the population of Africa is growing tremendously, and I'll give you a little statistic that might shock you if you don't know already. In the year 2050, the population of Nigeria will be equal to the population of the United States of America. Only one country of the 55 countries in Africa will have the same population as that of Nigeria. The second thing with the issue of demographics is that when you look at the statistical analytics of population, as Africa goes towards a larger proportion of the population in the world, and when I say that, let's give you a figure so that you can understand what I'm talking about. The southern countries, and we are talking about those countries I mentioned, the Indo-Pacific and Africa, will be 85% of the middle income spending population in the world in the next 15 to 20 years. This is significant. And no matter what political governance we may have, whatever political global institutions we may have, suddenly there is something here that will come from Africa. I don't know what it is. I have no idea how this power of the population will come. But one significant thing is that it's more sustainable than that of the largely dominating countries in the world, because of only one reason, that Africa's population is largely below 35 years. And that will continue over the next 50 years. The population pyramid will continue in Africa and in Asia. That's not the case in the predominant powers of the world today. And that means markets will flow southwards. True, companies will merge. Companies are playing a significant role in the geopolicy and geopolitics of the world. I don't believe that nations anymore contribute to what geopolitics is going to give us in the next 15 years as companies, large companies will do. When large companies begin controlling the economy much more than political nations and the so-called democracies, well, the game changes. Now it will be communities, not nations, that will control. The communities that control companies will control the world. And this is something that disturbs the heart, and I don't know how it applies to Africa. And with that, I think I just want to say one last thing. An observation that has occurred to me is, as the world changes technologically, cultures seem to distinguish themselves more and more. And therefore, I summarize by saying, I don't know how all this integration of knowledge will transform the globe into a community. Because the more we grow wealthy, the wiser we become, it seems the more disparate we become culturally speaking. Thank you very much.
Thank you, George. You highlighted one of the things I certainly worry the most about, which is the increasing signs of disorganization, fragmentation, the opposite of community. So the Middle East has been mentioned by a number of our speakers, and I'm going to jump out of order and ask Dr. Ziad Bahauddin to speak next about where the world is going from the particular perspective of the Middle East. As you know, he's a distinguished Egyptian lawyer, former member of parliament, Dr. Bahauddin.
I'm not sure which microphone we're using now, so consider this a test. Can everyone hear now? No.
Here you go.
Okay. So back to the old microphone. Well, I'm delighted to be here, and I'm delighted to have the simple task of commenting on the fate of 400 million people living in the Arab world. But let me just say that looking back at the last 8 years, it's easy to be very pessimistic when we look at the outcome of the Arab Spring over the Arab region. It has been a difficult time for everyone. Everyone has suffered, albeit to very varying degrees. But on the whole, the aspirations and dreams of the Arab revolutions have not brought about the kind of outcomes that were hoped for 8 years ago. We have not seen a breakthrough in the political institutions and democratic paths. We have not seen a marked change in welfare and economic sustainability. We have not seen a return or acquiring a level of freedoms and of justice and of equality that were the slogans of the Arab Spring. In fact, human development indicators have declined in a number of countries, not to mention total descent into war, chaos, and civil wars. But I am a firm believer that the region is not doomed. In fact, I actually think that it is ripe for another wave of change. In fact, I don't think that whether change will occur once more or not is the question. It is rather about the type of change that will occur and the outcomes that it will bring about once it happens. This conviction is not just daydreaming, is not just aspiring for something that is completely, baseless. I think this is the case because fundamentally, the systems that are in place are not going to be able to cope with the growing needs of the region. By and large, the institutional setups that dominated the Arab world prior to the Arab Spring have not actually changed much, neither in terms of economic institutions, political institutions, institutions of justice, law and order, and therefore what drove the Arab world to change 8 years ago is going to drive it to another wave sooner or later, albeit with a lot of wisdom gained as the result of the failures of the first wave. Demography is pushing in that direction. The percentage of youth in population is pushing in that direction. The number of people who are aspiring to a different future is pushing in that direction. And therefore, if change is inevitable, and I think it is, then we should really be concerned and work in order to ensure that it is peaceful and that it is sustainable and that it is, on the whole, positive and brings about positive outcomes. And in that front, I think that whereas the institutions have not changed much from pre-Arab Spring times, as I said, I think there is a much deeper wisdom and appreciation of what has happened that runs through most of the Arab population today, and therefore that will make our choices for the future much better informed and much better balanced. That change, in order for it to be positive, in order for it to be peaceful, and in order for it to be sustainable, will have primarily to be a negotiated change. I think we have all come to the realization that change is not going to come in a manner that is forced by any one party over the rest of society. It has got to be negotiated, and it has got to be reflective of a certain new balance in society. Change will also have to be gradual, and we have to respect that gradualism is not only necessary, but is actually going to be a virtue in itself, because it will ensure that every positive gain is steady and is well-founded and is not subject to reversal. Gradual doesn't mean slow. It just is the opposite of sudden, one punch makes it all happen approach. It also has to be participatory in some respect. Now, whether that type of participation is called democracy, it's called governance, it's called accountability, it's called shura, doesn't matter what it's called, but it has got to involve a certain level of participation and of accountability for it to have any credibility among the vast majority of people living in this part of the world. It also has to be inclusive, and I'm very clear in my mind what inclusive means. It doesn't matter whether those who are participating in it are members of the old kingdom, the middle kingdom, or the new kingdom. What matters is that it is got to be change that is open to the participation of everyone, no matter their political conviction, except those who have committed crimes, who have killed, who have looted, who have been involved in systemic corruption. But no one should be excluded on the basis of any political belief or any social belief or any conviction, whatever it is, and no matter how shocking it can be. There also has to be an appreciation of respect of law. And what I mean here is not the usual slogan about respect of law. It is law with a big L, with a capital L. It is law that people face when they are contesting over the ownership of a tiny little property or over a very small debt. It is not law that we come across only when faced with big issues, with big human rights issues, with big constitutional debates. It is law on the everyday life. There has got to be a new assertion of law as the normal way for resolving every single type of dispute, no matter how small it is. We also have to have a renewed faith in the principle of non-discrimination and the principle of equality. It's not good enough to have a flavor of the month attitude. It's gender equality today, it's Christian equality tomorrow, it's rights for the handicapped next week. It's got to be a principle that is embraced wholeheartedly in every single manifestation that it has, and therefore taking it to, again, its limit. And there has to be rethinking in the region about what kind of economy people are aspiring for, what social justice means, to leave behind the idea that social justice is necessarily more taxation or more taking away from those who have. It's got to be social justice that is based on better opportunities, better public services, better education, equal opportunity for everyone to participate in a market economy. We also have to appreciate, as I said, that if it is to be a negotiated change, then negotiations have to involve institutions. They're not negotiations among the intellectuals. They're not negotiations among those who write in newspapers or speak on television. They're negotiations between institutions. The army is an institution in every Arab country. It is one of the biggest institutions, and it is one which has had a lot of influence on shaping the form that Arab countries today are like. And therefore, there's got to be negotiation with the armed forces, with the police, with the judiciary, with the syndicates, with the business community, with the youth representatives, but there has to be a negotiated process out of this. And finally, I would like to say that none of this will happen, none of that change will happen if we do not manage to convince the young in the Arab world of the necessity to have faith once more in political activity, in joining parties, in joining movements, in joining whatever form of organized effort. belonging to, protesting over the internet, shouting, screaming, being angry, all of this belongs in one side. But being part of change means willing to engage in that change. Now, I appreciate very much that a lot of people will say, but is the possibility open for political participation? Is it open for the young people to join political parties? I think it is. And I think it is, even if difficult at times, but it only gets easier the more people are willing to go through the formal, legitimate, peaceful political institutions and not think that change will happen just because everyone wants it to happen. I am personally optimistic. I feel that the fact that the current institutional setup is not going to be able to deliver for the next few decades, that we are back to the same institutional setups that have created one crisis before, I am confident that change will happen, and even more optimistic that we will have learned from the first wave of change, but we have to put a lot of effort into ensuring that it goes in a peaceful, sustainable, and negotiated manner. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Ziad. So I want to turn finally to my friend Shankar Menon, the former National Security Advisor of India, one of the smartest public policy analysts I know. Shankar.
Thank you, David. Whoops. Now that I have the last word. Nobody makes the case for optimism better than Kishore. I just wish he was more than just partly right. It's because if you think of it, what we've achieved, there is a greater proportion of humanity today lives better, longer, healthier lives than ever before, when you look at mankind as a whole. Between 2000 and 2011, India and China pulled 232 million people out of poverty. 140 million or so were in India. Now that's a huge achievement, and that's a huge change. But sadly, that's not the whole truth. If you look at the world around us and you look at the situations that we've created for ourselves, most of these are man-made problems. You look at the whole new security agenda, which Anne-Marie Slaughter mentioned, climate change, terrorism. You look at the global commons, keeping it open, whether it's cyberspace or maritime security. Each of these are issues that no one country can solve on its own, that they require cooperative solutions across the board. And yet, what have we done? You look at every region of the world, internal politics is going through churn and is actually taking a turn towards ultranationalism, towards the centralization of power, all of which makes the negotiation, the give and take, that is essential to negotiations, to diplomacy, and to cooperative solutions more difficult. Why have we got here? It's paradoxical. Globalization actually made us into one global economy. We've never been quite so united as an economy, as a world, ever before in history. But it also made politics local. It fragmented politics because people felt their identity was threatened, they felt foreigners were taking their jobs away, and they got nervous of what they saw and therefore started circling the wagons. And you see this political process everywhere around the world. So you now have a world in disjuncture. We live in a world that is economically multipolar. There's no question. The shares of GDP, you look at how it's distributed around the world, and as a result, the balance of power has shifted considerably. But in military terms, we're still unipolar. In fact, overwhelmingly so. The Royal Navy at the height of Pax Britannica had a two-navy standard. They wanted to be equivalent to the next two navies in the world. The US Navy today is equivalent to the next 16 navies together. And if you look at the US defense budget, it's equivalent to the next 7 countries put together. This is a unipolar world militarily. So what's the result? Politically, we're thoroughly confused. There's no correlation between the actual balance of power and the international institutions that we all put so much faith in, the multilateral institutions. They just don't reflect the reality that's out there, which is why nobody goes to them with anything that's important, but we all go there to use them as platforms for our propaganda and to wave sticks at other people that we don't like. Do the US and China go to the WTO when they get into trade difficulties? No. Have any of us ever taken anything that matters to us to one of these institutions? So we really are in a politically confused state between orders. So where are we going with this? For me, it's the long-term drivers that we should be looking at. It's no longer east and west or north and south. Look at the drivers. Look at demography, which you mentioned. Look at technology, which again you mentioned. Look at where these things are leading us. Look at the energy revolution. Look at what digital manufacturing will do to jobs and the distribution and comparative advantage, economic advantage between various societies. So it seems to me if we look at that, what we're in for is a world where there's no going back from a globalized economic world. It might be a slower world, but there's no going back. I think everyone has discovered that decoupling is not possible. Since the crisis in 2007-8, I think we've figured that much out. But expect politics to be much more fractious and local. You see it already in great power rivalries. You see territorial maritime disputes. You see that across. We have managed to militarize every new technology. Look what we did to the internet. Once, how we've militarized, and not just states. I mean, this is small groups of individuals, terrorists, various people have managed to do that. So expect much more fractious politics. Can we manage this? Will we survive this? Will we come out better? I'm actually an optimist because I actually think that an open multipolar system is actually much more stable than bipolarity or unipolarity, by definition, because, and what we seem to be heading towards, to my mind, is something like 19th century Europe, where several powers of differing power and capability cooperate, compete, and shift their alliances and what they do, but based on the issues. You'll find completely different sets of people working together across different geographies. And this is a much more fluid world with much more potential. But I do think that we can handle this because every problem I've mentioned is a man-made problem. There's nothing intrinsic in this that we cannot actually overcome. Now, you tell me, David, if that's a summary of what you heard.
That is a good summary. These are man-made problems. They will be men and women solved problems. So I know that Egyptians like to eat late, but I don't want to tax people's patience. So I want to take 5 more minutes. I promise you no more than that, and just have a quick lightning round with brief final comments from each of our panelists. I want to start with Kishore. You started us off with a provocation. You dropped a bomb right at the beginning. And the question I want to ask you is, in this Asian century led by China, is China going to be a benign hegemon for this world that needs one?
Very quickly, by the way, I just want to say one word for Mary. One statistic you must remember is that the West makes up 12% of the world's population. 88% live outside. So if you bet on 12%, don't forget the 88%. Now, your question on China. If I knew the answer to the question whether China will be a benign hegemon, I'll be a very, very wealthy man. Anybody who tells you how China will turn out, they're lying. Because even as we speak, China is making decisions. China is evolving. China is changing. So how you actually treat China as it is rising, right? If you treat it as someone you can work with, as a friend, as a partner, then China will turn out to be friendly. But if you provoke China, if, for example, you say, I support the independence of Taiwan, then I guarantee you, you're going to get a very angry dragon to deal with in the world. So that's why my next book will be about United States-China relations and how you prevent an angry dragon from coming and taking over the world.
Fabulous. We will we'll await it. So, Anne-Marie, I want to ask you in a lightning round question. In this era that we're leaving, led by the United States, the world was characterized, whatever mistakes the United States made, by openness and by rule of law. Are you confident, or do you have any hope, maybe that's a better way to put it, that those two qualities, openness and rule of law, can survive the evident decline of American power?
So my answer to Kishore answers your question. I said I bet on the West, but the West for me is not simply the geographic West. I quite agree that that is with George, that's no longer the way to think about the world. I meant open societies versus closed ones. Right now, the American president, no, I said the G7, which is the G20 now. I still think will hang together better than the E7, but the point is, right now, the American president wants closed, right? So right now, the United States, as represented on the world stage, is not standing for open. Indeed, many countries, depending on populism, are standing for closed. I bet on open societies across Africa, across Asia, across Europe, across the Americas, against closed ones. However, David, that honestly is probably a matter of conviction more than prediction.
I want to make that same bet on openness prevailing. George, I want to ask you. You talked about business. I was stunned to hear that Microsoft and Google are about to get banking licenses. Once upon a time, we used to say, when we went to places like Davos, that free markets will make free men, meaning we assumed that this economic transformation of globalization would lead to more open societies. That doesn't seem to have happened. Are free markets going to have a more liberating effect in the future in Africa? In your 1 minute close.
They certainly will. Unless you have free markets, then you're going to stranglehold the power of the people and of the individual and of communities. You cannot close people with rules and regulations that impose sanctions on their thinking and their ability to invest capital and their ability to innovate. So the free market system was good insofar as it allowed those who had money, those who had skills, to invest them anywhere in the world. But in the process, they forgot the value and dignity of the human being. Free markets became equivalent to making money. And that was a significant weakness in the system, and it still is in the free market system of the United States. But I don't want to go there too much because that's an argument that's difficult to place now. I think that thinking of the Arab world and thinking of the African world, we have to move the education of our people on average to about 60%. We are still below 30%. Most of the Arab population is not skilled. Most of the African population is not skilled. The future is for those who are skilled. Most of the Arab world and most of the African people is not educated. And therefore, they are the pawns of any wild man who takes up the political field. The future of politics is understanding that there must be a negotiated common good for the humanity of the world. And if that's not going to happen, necessarily we are going to war. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Shankar, I want to ask you as a final comment, a question that haunts me. And that is whether what we're seeing in the United States with President Trump this populist nationalism, is an aberration, and America will return to something like what the world has known, like what we've known as Americans, or whether this is really the new normal.
I don't think there's any going back, but I don't think this is the new normal either. Because frankly, in my lifetime, I've seen the US remake herself 3 times, completely, from the bootstraps up. Civil rights, Great Society, the Reagan Revolution, and what happened with digital technology, and what you look at. And now we're in the middle of the 4th. So to me, this is not permanent. This will change, because there are US interests in the rest of the world. The US cannot withdraw, pack up, and go home. But it will have to develop the other tools. You know, the trouble is, if you have a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. If what you have is the world's most powerful military, you militarize your foreign policy. And so I think that's the shift that I would expect would come, because as I said, the US is the only society I know that has this capacity to examine itself, reinvent itself, and change itself.
I hope and pray you're right. Dr. Ziad, let me ask you to bring our conversation to a close. And I'm going to ask you, when we come back for the 20th anniversary of Dr. Nabil's wonderful school, I hope the founding dean will still be in place. What are we going to see here in Egypt and in the Middle East? Will this era that we've been living through, great turmoil, will that be past us 10 years from now?
I hope there'll be a as successful and thriving AUC as there will be for the next 100 years, or just for the next 10 years, to be honest. And I'm delighted to be participating in a centennial and looking forward to the next one. For the Arab world, I am strangely perhaps optimistic, and I really am. I am optimistic because I am convinced that the next decade will be the one that will see the Arab world come out of the kind of very complex, unresolvable state in which it has been for the last 50 years. I think that the change in demography among the youth, the change of thinking, the openness to the outside world is going to force change to happen, and I'm confident that it's going to be a negotiated one, and I hope that next 10 years will be a very, perhaps difficult at times, very testing at times, but certainly worth being around.
That's beautifully said. A wonderful way to end our conversation. Thank you, audience, for your patience, and thank our panelists. So let me ask Jasmine, our Master of Ceremonies, if she would rejoin us and invite us to dinner.
Thank you very much, David, for being our moderator tonight. Thank you, our esteemed panelists. That was extremely interesting and also very enlightening. Thank you, our dear guests, for being with us tonight. We do hope that you've enjoyed this panel, and I really do still wonder where is the world going, but I have one observation that I think each one of our panelists was a bit defending their continent. I mean, Africa, Asia, and the Arab world, and the United States, but we will see. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have. To many more years of success to GAPP and commitment to enlightened governance and service to human and mankind. I hope you enjoy your dinner, but before dinner we'll be watching a video that we have put together to celebrate the 10th anniversary of GAPP. Thank you very much again.